My name is Steve Mogel. I'm the new principal here, and I'm really pleased to have you all here for a very fun and informative evening. But I'm going to keep it short and hand it over right to Miss Amanda Fernandez.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Buenas noches, ¿cómo están todos esta noche?
Yeah.
Muy bueno. Gracias por venir esta noche. Yo me llamo Amanda Fernandez. I'm Amanda Fernandez, and I'm the CEO and founder of a fairly new organization in Massachusetts called Latinos for Education. And our work is really focused on developing, connecting, and supporting Latinos in the education sector. We think it's very important to have a very reflective teaching community and leader community in education that looks like our students. And especially in Holyoke and other communities across Massachusetts, with the demographic of the Latino community, we think it's essential that there is more Latino leadership that represents our students and our voices. So that's a little bit about our work. I'm also on the State Board of Education. I have the pleasure and a responsibility that I take very seriously, being on the Board of Education, and that is how I know the commissioner. And so when he was appointed to his role, one of the things that I had asked him to do was to make sure that as he does his listening tour, as he goes across the state, talking to different communities, to prioritize and to make sure that it was very inclusive of Latino community voices and leadership. So he is participating in 3 of these town halls, these foro comunitarios. And we did one on Monday in Boston, obviously tonight, and then we'll do a 3rd in Somerville. But the requests are already coming in, Commissioner, to please come to our school district. So we'll see where we go from there. I would like to introduce Commissioner Riley, and we're very grateful for his presence here. We know that Holyoke is top of mind for him and his role, but I will turn it over to you to say some words to the community members here, and thank you for being here, Commissioner.
Good evening, everyone. Let me tell you, I am the Commissioner of Education. Before that, I was the Superintendent Receiver in the Lawrence Public Schools for 7 years before that. And then the bulk of my career is spent in the Boston Public Schools, where my children have gone since they were in kindergarten. I have 2 kids. They're 15 and 13. And my 15-year-old is a typically performing kid. He's actually something of a whiz at math. He does very well. And my daughter has always struggled. And we knew when she started kindergarten in Boston that things could go badly for her. She has something called sensory integration disorder. She has speech issues. And so she was going to need a suite of services when she went to kindergarten, including having to wear a weight vest in class. She was going to have elastics put on the bottom of her chair to help her kind of regulate. She was going to need movement breaks throughout the day. She was going to have to get be pulled out of class for speech, OT, PT, and different things. And so we were afraid that she was going to be teased and bullied, and she was going to hate school. But the reality of the situation is that was not the case. My daughter has loved school, and from every day, from the age of 5 until the age of 12, it stopped at 12. She's 13 now. I would come home, and she would run to the door and say, "Daddy, Daddy, let's play school." Now, Daddy's played a lot of school. But I played with her because she just loved everything about education. And the reason she loved it is because of the teachers she had who took care of her, right? And I never needed to go to a parent conference. I went. But when we played school, invariably she would be the teacher, I would be the student. She had the do now, the agenda, there were bathroom breaks. I mean, I knew exactly what was going on. I do like to think that the squirt gun she used as a disciplinary device against me was her own flair and not what the teacher was doing, because then I probably would have had to file a 51A, but we don't have time for that. And so I come at this as an educator for over 25 years, almost all in urban experiences, but more than that as a parent. who wants the best for all their kids and wants all my kids, and I now have 1 million children plus my own too, to develop to their maximum potential. And if you could see my daughter now from what she was, and those teachers saved her life, right? And isn't that what we want for our kids, for them to develop to the best of their abilities? And so we're living in kind of unfortunate times. The Chinese call them interesting times, which is not a good thing. And we're seeing a country that in some ways is being pulled apart. Some of it is about the loss of the middle class, right? If you look at American public school children now, 51% of American public school children live at or near the poverty line now, which means they qualify for free or reduced lunch. 51%. In Massachusetts, we're a little bit buffered from that because we have a very strong economy. But if you look across the southern states, in particular up to California, where it's red, more than 50% of the kids in schools are living in poverty. And we know there are effects that come with that. Just like there are effects for my daughter who has special needs, or for kids that have to learn a second language, right? Each kid is different and comes with a unique set of circumstances, and our job is to figure out how to get them what they need. I came from a Marine Corps family. My father did several tours in Vietnam. He believes deeply in the idea of America as a meritocracy. The idea that if you work hard enough, anyone can do or be anything they want. Okay, but that only actually works if all kids start in the same place when they're 18. And what we know is city kids aren't always given this, and rural poor kids too, by the way, aren't always given the same opportunities as some of our wealthier suburban peers. And so how do we as a community address that? Massachusetts is very excited these days to tell you about how it's leading the nation. And what that means is Massachusetts is truly leading the nation. It is the best state when it comes to various test scores. But what I've told people is before we break our arms patting ourselves on the back, we need to look closer. Because when you look closer at the data, we're not leading the nation for everybody. A report came out recently that says we're #1 for some. Children with disabilities like my daughter, second language learner kids, kids who live in poverty, still have these big gaps with kind of their wealthier peers. And so it's a moral kind of responsibility for us to make sure that we get the resources our kids need. Because at the end of the day, it's really just about fairness, right? If we truly want to be fair, if we truly want to be a meritocracy in this country, it has to be fair. Kids need to have the same chances as a kid born into a wealthy family. So how do we do that? That's not the slide I wanted. One of the ways we do it is through something called the foundation budget. There is a formula that was put out a long time ago about the foundation formula, and it has been proven to be broken. And what I mean by that is they calculated costs back in the day that have gone kind of all haywire. And the districts that are being the most affected by it are the gateway communities. Holyoke, Brockton, Lawrence. I was told that this formula is so broken that in Lawrence, where I was the superintendent for the last 7 years, like we were being shorted somewhere between $7 and $10 million a year. What I could have done with that money for my children, right? And look, I mean, Lawrence was maybe on average $14,000 per kid. Boston, where my kids go, they have a huge tax base. They have $20,000 per kid. Cambridge, $28,000 per kid. I'm not sure that's fair. So what we need to do is get our legislators to kind of fix this foundation formula so that we get the resources to the folks who need it the most. But that can't be the only thing we need to do. At the end of the day, I talked to you about my daughter and teachers. It's all going to come down to great teaching. We spent a lot of time on systems and structures, on test scores and accountability, and we've kind of gotten away from the idea of how important a teacher is to a child's life. And the variation in teacher quality is real. Not all teachers are the same. In this country, the variation's like this. In Finland or Canada, it's only like this. Their highest performing teacher is closer to their lowest performing teacher. In America, we've got a wider gap. That doesn't mean you have to fire all the teachers. It just means you have to give them opportunities to learn from the better people and train them up. we could do that, but we haven't set aside the time or the space to do that. So we need to kind of get back to authentic teaching and learning and what happens in the classroom. Because let me assure you, everything happens in the classroom with those children. It's not in the bureaucracy. It's not in Malden where I work at the state. It's what happens in those individual classrooms that matters. So how do we get there? And what is good teaching? I've gone around the state. We've talked about, we did an ad campaign this year to celebrate and support our teachers. And we had a bunch of little kids talking about their favorite teacher. And we featured Jamil Siddiqui, who is the Massachusetts Teacher of the Year. Jamil's been teaching math for 24 years at East Bridgewater High School. He has 20 of his former students are now teachers in Massachusetts. 15 of them are math teachers like Jamil in Massachusetts. And Jamil said to me when I had a long conversation with him, the thing that bothers me the most, I don't have the chance to talk to my colleagues. Don't we need to plug his brain into everybody else's brain and let him share his amazing practice? I went to the ceremony at this high school. There were children almost crying. They love this man so much. Don't we want that for our kids? And can't he impart his knowledge on other teachers so they raise their game? And so why don't we get back to doing that? But it can't just be the teachers in the classroom. The community plays a huge part in what we're trying to do. And it starts with people at home. Parents are the best teachers we have. The number one teachers we have are parents. People ask me, what does good teaching look like? I literally could spend the next 72 hours without a break talking to you about great pedagogy and instructional practice. I promise you I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to show you a short video which to me crystallizes what great teaching is all about. That is, if I can make the technology work.
When I am down and oh my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait here in the silence till you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. Raise me up to more than I can be. your shoulders, you raise me up to more than I can be.
So in this case, the dad is the teacher, the father who taught his son to run track, who took him as a child to all the meets, drove him here, drove him there, who helped his son achieve his dream to go to the Olympics. He got to the Olympics, he was supposed to win the gold medal. And when things went wrong, his father intervened, got him back up. If you watch that video, one of the interesting things for me is when his son keeps trying to put his hand to his face, and his father pulls his hand down, as if to tell him, keep your head up. And the dad, the most interesting thing though, is that the dad does not finish the race with him, but sends him to finish it on his own. And if that's not the definition of good teaching, I don't know what is. What I would say to you guys is, I'm new to this position, but I've heard a lot of great things about Holyoke and what's happened, and it's sort of reminding me in some ways about what happened in Lawrence when I started 7 years ago, and people were saying bad things about us. And what we did instead was said, you're not going to talk about us like that, and we're going to do this in spite of you. And in Lawrence, our graduation rate went way up, our dropout rate went way down, we fixed the buildings, we added back arts and enrichment, which by the way may not show up on a test but are important in life for the full development of our children, right? Test scores went up, that's fine, okay. But people say, oh, well, how did that happen? And there were many reasons, there were many things that we did to try to make things better. Part of it was we had a school committee, like you guys have here, who cares deeply about the kids and is working with the superintendent to make change, right? This idea of enlisting people in the process and doing it together is really important. Part of it is the families have jumped in to make sure their kids get what they need. Part of it in Lawrence, which I can't say enough about, and people, I like to think of it as the secret sauce, was this slide, which is active employees who actually lived in Lawrence, who joined the school system while I was there. And as you see, we started with 378, and then in 2018 we had 832. Because when people were saying bad things about Lawrence, people in Lawrence said, you're not going to talk about us like that. And they jumped in and helped. Okay, and that includes, by the way, the most important slide might be here. 168 of our teachers are Latino teachers, which is almost tripling the number of Latino teachers in Lawrence in a 5-year period. There's research out there that says a child of color that sees just one teacher that looks like them has significantly better life outcomes than if they don't see anyone that looks like them. So it's important, right? And so what we did is we did a couple things. We got a lot of our paraprofessionals, a lot of the moms who were in the district, and we got them trained up to be teachers because they were amazing. We took a lot of our kids that had graduated high school and went to college, brought them back and said, we're going to hook you up with the NACA program. You guys have this here? It's a low interest, no points, no closing cost mortgage program where if the rate for a mortgage today is 4.5, you could get a mortgage, a 30-year mortgage if you're in the NACA program for like 2.0 points, 2%, with no points, no closing costs. And we brought a lot of our kids back into Lawrence and helped them kind of seed, this burgeoning middle class because people decided we're going to do this together. When I left Lawrence, nobody said it was Riley that did this. You know what they said? They said we did it ourselves. So what I would ask for you is just to keep doing what you're doing. We've seen some great things already with graduation rate up, dropout rate down. We've seen the buildings are now kind of in a pipeline, hopefully to get replaced. And we'll see, the academic gains will come. But just kind of keep doing what you're doing. And with that, I think I am done. Oh, Mr. Strike, are you next? Sure. Okay, the man of the hour, Mr. Strike. Let's give him a round of applause.
I know that Riley was going to have all this multimedia. I'm just going to talk. I'll just be brief because I have a lot of comments to share as part of our the forum and really to go through our progress and the work still ahead. But this work is deeply personal for me. Some of you what you don't know is that I grew up, I went to school and my first language is Spanish. Some of you wouldn't know that now by my broken Spanish, but and my mother's upset about that. But I still I practice here. You've heard me, but I went to school not speaking any English. My mother came from Cuba when she was 9 years old, and I think a lot about that, my experience growing up. And I did very well in school, but I was a young man. I was a child of privilege. I lived. My father spoke English. We had above a middle class upbringing, and I was able to transition from my native language, which was Spanish, to English, and do very well in school because I had a literacy-rich environment at home. I was in good schools. I knew I was going to college because my father and mother and my grandparents, even from Cuba, had gone to college. And so, I hear a lot from people about, why can't our kids, why do our kids struggle the way they do? And I think a lot about, I had a whole different set of supports and resources as a young Latino male that the children that we serve don't necessarily have. It's not because their families don't care. They deeply care. They want their kids to be successful. They are committed to finding the best schools for their children. But what drove me to do this work is my own experience to try to build that same experience for the young people of Latino communities in my home state. I grew up most of my life in Massachusetts. I wanted to be a superintendent of a gateway city my whole, from the time I was in high school. When I became a principal in the Boston Public Schools, it was about coming to serve the Latino community and trying to replicate what I think is the experience that I know I had, and I was fortunate to have every single child deserves to have in the city of Holyoke. And right now they don't. They don't. And I'm not gonna paint a beautiful picture. There is good progress, but we have so much work to do as a system. That our results say that, and it's not just test scores; it's parent satisfaction levels, student satisfaction levels. I want to celebrate what's great, but I also know there's tremendous work ahead. What invigorates me, and what I've found my match in is being in the city of Holyoke. I look around this room, and I would have introduced there's too many important people in this room for me to do introductions. People, elected officials, active families, members of my team. But there's a fierce commitment here that I don't care what anybody says about the city of Holyoke. This city wants our young people to be successful. Our parents are fiercely committed. All of you are. And I'm excited to have this dialogue today because it's important that the rest of the state knows. Look, I lived in Massachusetts most of my life. And my wife has roots in Holyoke, but did I know this community? No. And I think there's a lot of folks that don't know both the pride that exists here, the commitment, but also the challenges that are unique to Western Massachusetts and to the city of Holyoke, which are not the same as others. And I think it's important that people tonight share some of those those thoughts, those ideas, ask questions, because this community needs a whole lot more support. And I think we have a good start, and I'm really grateful. I see all the people in the standing room, only seats over there. But there's a team here ready to do the work and fight for what our kids deserve to have. And so I'm grateful to welcome you to Holyoke, to Morgan School, where Morgan is a proof point. And I'll talk about it later in my notes of a place where they've begun to turn the corner for students that others never believed could be successful. This is a fitting place to have tonight's session in a school in South Holyoke with all of you, and I look forward to the discussion ahead. Welcome to Holyoke.
Thank you, Superintendent Reich. I'm so inspired by you and what you're doing here, and all the teachers and other leaders. I had the opportunity to come to Holyoke a few months ago, and I got to hear the stories and see what's happening in the Morgan School. So it's just a privilege to be here, and thank you to the community for participating. So we are concluding this portion of the evening. We will kindly ask you to stay as long as you can to participate in the community forum, which is happening in just a few minutes. So we're closing out here.